Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need. Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm Carol the Coach, and welcome to Sex Help with Carol the Coach. You know, I feel so fortunate to be talking with you all. I can't tell you that enough. I know that if you're suffering with this disease, if you have this illness, and you're wondering why in the world would somebody like Carol the Coach have gratitude for working with people like me, because you and I are just alike. That's right. You and I are just alike. We've just gone down different paths. And I know that. And I want you to know that. I want you to know that you have all the chances in the world to recover if you work a strong recovery program. And I want to give you hope, strength, and recovery, no matter what the issues are. It can be very, very difficult to deal with sex addiction. I guarantee you it is the hardest addiction to deal with. Way harder than meth, cocaine, crack, alcohol, gambling, spending, overspending, eating disorders, you name it. This is tough stuff. But as I told one of my clients today, it may be tough stuff, but when you recover from it, you grow exponentially. And that means that you grow faster and stronger than any other client that I work with. And that's my promise to you. You got to hang in there, you got to get the tools, and you got to keep working it every single day. And so many of you know that I say there's certain things you got to do. Tonight I was talking with a man that he doesn't believe in a higher power, so that is not something he can access in his recovery. And it's almost challenging for him with me, because I can sense that he doesn't believe in a higher power, and he's angry that so many people try to force that upon him since he's got an addiction. Well, today I tried to say, hey, well, is there anything that you consider your higher power? And he really was not able to say anything but his own good works and what he can do. And I said, well, let's start there then. We all don't have to fit into the same mold. And this is a man who's very intelligent. He's got a lot of backbone, But you know what he does? He's an IT guy for an entire corporation, and he watches porn all day long. And he masturbates in his office, and he's a mess. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that he'll be the first to admit that he at any point could get fired from his job, arrested, and lose everything he loves, including his wife. So he's come to me to get some help, and I've got him in group, and I've got him in individual therapy. And he's in Smart Recovery. It's called Recovery Nation, and it's online internet resource group for people that don't particularly believe in the 12-step program. And so he's working the steps and the tools. I shouldn't say the steps because they really aren't steps. He's working the different units to get healthy. And this man has so much to offer. He knows it, I know it, and it's just figuring out what is the right combination that's going to work. You know what it's like when you've been told that you have to do something and you don't want to do it. You know, maybe you lack empathy. You really don't care who is affected by your illness, but you know you're affected, and that's what matters. Well, I would be working with you on developing empathy because, you know, you're not a rock. You can't live in this world alone, and we've got to figure out what to do to increase your ability to understand how your actions affect people that you love. Oh, I know. If you're thinking like I was thinking, if he doesn't have empathy, can he really love? Well, what I know to be true is that when people have experienced trauma, when they've experienced horrible, horrible things in their childhood, they learn to shut off all their feelings, so they don't particularly relate to other people, and they don't particularly have empathy. And they do come first. It's a survival skill. It's a coping mechanism. I get that. They get that. So part of the work is to actually help them to learn how to connect to people, because I'm telling you, if you really want to be happy in life, you got to connect. And you may think you can do it on your own. You may think that you don't need people, but guess what? You do. And so I'm here to help you with that. And I can't emphasize that enough. You're not going to shake me. You're not going to lose me. I am here with you every Monday night at 9 o'clock. And again, I feel so much gratitude and so much honor to be able to help you because I know you are just absolutely suffering. And when you suffer, it can be difficult to do the things you got to do to make your life better. And so that's where the hope, strength, and recovery comes in, because I want to help you with that. You know, I want to direct you to the right books. I want to direct you to the right programs. I want to direct you to the right people. And, of course, I want you to listen to the show because, boy, oh, boy, I really believe that this is a show that can make a difference in your life. How do I know? Well, you know, when you've been in the business like I have for 33 years, you do know. And then, secondly, what I know to be true is that you wouldn't be listening to this show right now if you didn't want to get better. You just may not know how, or you may need a boost of encouragement. Well, tonight I'm going to be interviewing Lisa Ferguson. And Lisa is the executive director of Light Source Counseling. And that is a counseling agency that specializes in helping individuals and families recover from the devastation of all types of addiction, whether that be chemical addiction, sexual addiction, alcoholism. She's also been a pastoral counselor since 1996 and has made it her mission to focus on the area of addictions. Now, she's a CSAT. She went through the Patrick Carnes Gentle Path program. You know, that's through the International Institute for Trauma and Addiction Professionals. And she has a decade of experience teaching at the university. So I guarantee you, she's going to make what she has to talk to us about easy to understand. And actually, she said, Carol, what I would really like to do is I would like to talk about how to navigate one's own side of the street, especially in terms of anxiety. So she's going to be talking about how do you work through stress, anxiety, how do you create wisdom, courage, and acceptance, and what is stress management? Because you and I both know that when you have this condition, you are spending lots and lots and lots of time, and you are actually figuring out how to manage getting your needs met, lying to your spouse, ignoring your work. I mean, your first and foremost interest is in pornography or multiple affairs or exhibitionism, voyeurism. You've got this brain lock on this compulsive activity, and it has taken a hold of your life, and it absolutely comes first. And you and I both know that. And you can rid yourself of that in that you can learn how to recover and manage that condition, but it doesn't come easy. And so what do? Very, very clearly, if you've been listening to some of my shows with addicts, you know that what is so important, first and foremost, is that you have the desire and the willingness to change. Talking with a guy tonight, and, he said, I'm 2 days clean of pornography, and I'm getting sick and tired of not being able to go 5, 6, or 7 days beyond. He goes, I don't know what the deal is, but I know that if I don't stop the pornography, I'll keep that reward center in my brain lit up, and I will go back to deal-breaking behaviors. This is an incredibly intelligent, successful man who has upped his addiction game to the point where he's hanging out with transgendered prostitutes. He's hanging out in seedy places, and he's putting himself at risk every single day. And so what I know to be true is that that's a life or death situation. And Patrick Carnes told him, he said, you are flirting with death, my friend, if you don't stay on course. So when he returned to Indianapolis, Indiana, which most of you know, that's where I'm based out of, he sought the only certified sexual addictions therapist. Is that not pathetic? I'm the only one here in Indy. But I got to tell you, Lisa Ferguson is only 60 miles away, and I'm so excited that she is in this central Indiana area too. And he sought me out for individual counseling. He could have taught the course on sexual addiction. That's how bright he is. And yet this thing still has a compulsive hold on him. And so we've encouraged him to use Covenant Eyes, to get a sponsor and stick with them, to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, to do his recovery reading, call people in the fellowship. I actually have encouraged him to find a roommate because I believe he's lonely. He's a single guy, and if you've heard me talk about this before, sometimes being single and having this condition is the toughest thing in the world, because I always tell my clients, if you want to quit for somebody else, you go for it, because that's a great reason to stop a behavior. And that old adage about don't quit for anybody unless it's for yourself is bull. You can stop for somebody else, but once you really start working a program, you will find that eventually you reverse back and you want to stop for your own self-worth. So you may stop for your wife or your husband, but eventually you'll make the decision to do it for you. And that may come 1 week after you start the program. That may come 1 month. That may come 1 year. That may come 5 years. There is no time limit with this stuff. And what I've seen is miracles happen with my clients who work the program. And I know that this man is going to also eventually get it. He's got the desire. He's got the willingness. He just doesn't have all his tools in place. And today, he was asking people, I gave him the assignment, ask people what they do to avoid pornography. And so he went to the fellowship and he asked, and he got lots of advice as to what people do when it's time to really take your life to the next level and to be serious. And that is that counts. That is what makes a difference. You're listening to Sex Help with Carol the Coach, and I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, the only certified addictions therapist in Indianapolis. You know why I'm telling you that? I'm telling you that because I know that you may not have an area that has a CSAT, a Certified Sexual Addictions Therapist. And if that's the case, I want you to go to sexhelp.com, and I want you to put in your zip code or your country and find the nearest therapist to you. And if they are hundreds of miles away, then what I'm going to ask you to do is to look for somebody on that list that Skypes. They'll at least get you started with many of the tools that you need to take your life to the next level. Really, certified sexual addictions therapists understand what it takes to recover from this serious addiction. And that's what we're going to be talking to Lisa Ferguson about, because she knows how to manage stress and anxiety and cope with addiction. So, Lisa, welcome to the show.
Hi, Carol. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And, you know, so many of the addicts that both you and I work with, they deal with stress and they deal with anxiety and they deal with depression and anger and sadness. So I thought, what an excellent topic for you to be talking about tonight, how to navigate through that and learn how to recover and manage all those normal things that everybody deals with. But for our addicts, they deal with it a lot more. So tell me a little bit first about what made you go into this business. How did you get into the field of addictions?
Well, my journey was fairly late in life, and we had a family member who met with a bout of the worst kind with chemical addiction and survived. And so this family member admitted themselves into inpatient and is 5 years clean and sober at this point. And at that point, I began to study the field. It's a fascinating field, and it has actually quite a huge percentage of our population at this time dealing with it. So, having been a professor and a teacher and so forth, I had seen it a lot in the student population in various forms. Began to study it on my own, and it led to my licensure as a clinical addictions counselor. At that point, I began to help other people through this, on both sides of the table, the families needing a great deal of help as well as the addicts themselves. And then I began to see a couple of things that were characteristic of certain ones of my clients, and I kept seeing these things repeat themselves in different clients, but I did not know what I was looking at, and that is when I began to study the field of sexual addictions and became, at the end of the story, certified to recognize and work with addicts and their families as well. It's slightly different, but it does come under the heading of the disease of addiction. So that's kind of the short version of how I got from there to here.
Well, that's a good version, because obviously it shows people that typically our lives are directed by something personal that occurs, and clearly I know a lot of addicts are in recovery, and they have gone down the road of counseling, and they're helping other addicts and partners of addicts who are running COSA groups and helping other men and women who are partners. So I so appreciate that you decided to start Light Source Counseling, which is your counseling agency. You're the executive director.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the topic tonight. You know, what are the essentials to navigating stress?
Stress is just at the top of all of our lists in one form or another. As a clinician, stress is at the root of most of what I do in therapy. People who have addictions and the loved ones of those people have a peculiar kind, not peculiar, but a very specific kind of stress, depending on which side of the table they sit on, the addicts versus the family members and the loved ones of addicts. And it's actually a mirror image. So the stressors are generally similar and yet a bit opposite on both sides of the table. I would say that the essentials to navigating, though, are pretty much the same, because stress is an entity that has to have several things working in synergistic force to combat. And so I would say probably if I had to break that down, I would say first of all awareness, because we can't deal with something we're not aware we have. Next, I would say perhaps, for lack of a better word, maybe wisdom, and I can explain that in just a moment. I think certainly courage, because it does take courage to confront the things that we fear, and stress is usually motivated by something that we fear subliminally. And then finally, I think that a good component there to take us onward once we have navigated thus far would be the gift of acceptance.
Okay, so you said that you would go a little bit more into the wisdom, courage, and acceptance. So what do you mean by that? Because you say that's the essentials to navigating stress: awareness, wisdom, courage, and acceptance.
Right. Well, the awareness piece is first, because we cannot be on autopilot and then understand that we are being affected by stress. So most of us are so affected by stress that we don't think about it anymore. And so we have to sort of back up just a moment and become aware. You know, you've heard the expression, be here now. What am I feeling? You know, why am I agitated, and so forth and so on. Most of us have to work on that awareness. Secondly, once we cultivate the awareness, the wisdom is a very simple question to ourselves, and that is, okay, so now I'm aware that I'm stressing because of such and such. The question of wisdom is, what part of this is my job? Or another way to say that would be, what is on my side of the street here? And once we figure that part out, then it takes courage to overcome our own discomfort or fear by taking some kind of action. So for those of us who say, well, okay, so the wisdom has prevailed. I realize that part of this is not my job. It's someone else's behavior. And I can't control other people, but I can control myself. And so what can I do here? Well, that takes some courage. First of all, to say, there's part of this I can't change. And then to say, you know, I'm ready to change this piece that I can change. So that requires courage. The last part has to do with dealing with the part we cannot change. So being okay with something that is out of my control once I've figured out that there is a component of that in my stress.
Okay, can you give me an example using one of your clients and what awareness, wisdom, and courage, and lastly, acceptance that you saw in his or her life?
Right. I can give you an example that is a client story very, very generally.
Okay.
And then I have another example I might be able to give you maybe toward the end that is not a client. But the one that comes to mind is, many sex addicts come with just multiple home issues. Let's say those who have partners of a permanent nature. And generally speaking, once we get past a certain engagement with the addict and they've begun their program and so forth and so on, and they're in therapy, I generally begin to hear a lot about the partner and about a certain amount of dysfunction that's going on with their partner that triggers them and that kind of thing, which is, it's very real. There's no doubt about that. Our partner's behavior is something that in the best of scenarios could be perhaps talked about, counseled over, and so forth, but ultimately we cannot control our partner. None of us can. Addicts can't. Therapists can't. And so what we want to do with what we do with our clients is we encourage them to to be here now, to look at the things that are causing stresses. It's a good step forward to realize that they are triggered by certain stressors through their partners. But then what we have to do, and what I have done with several actually of my clients, one in particular has really done very, very well with this, is that he has he's well on his way to mastering the serenity of letting go of that partner and letting go of the things he cannot change about her. He cannot make her, for example, trust him. And that is not his job. His job is to be trustworthy. And he's working as hard as he can on that and has been for a year. So he's a year out, and it's beautiful to see. So those are the things that I could say in my experience. I have, several stories where people have begun to grow in that direction. This particular one stands out because this young man came in extremely broken, extremely hopeless, very, very much on the verge of not being able to get back. And he's over a year out, and at this point he has grown a great deal. And part of the growth process has been being able to come to terms with, if my partner is not on board with everything that I am doing in recovery, that has to be all right with me. And I can recover anyway using my network and my therapist and my higher power.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said, obviously, one of the first steps in navigating stress is that awareness, because I'm a big believer that we need to stay in the present as much as possible, and that can be a very difficult task when we're multitasking, when we have other people that we care about. But when we stay focused on the moment and stay in the present, we obviously are living life one day at a time, and we're much more in tune with body awareness, how we're feeling, what is ahead of us, by thinking about what is going on right this moment. And this is a society that does not endorse that. What I know to be true is if you really want to be happy in life, you have to stay in the moment, have gratitude, and be able to reframe things so that you always are asking yourself how to grow stronger. And when I look at your 4 words, awareness, wisdom, courage, and acceptance, it almost seems as if you're talking about being aware, deciding what it is one needs to learn and to figure out how to do that, and then facing your fears and having the courage to actually implement it, and then, of course, accepting whatever occurs in one's life. I mean, that's 4 very important words, and I like that formula for navigating stress.
Right. It's something that is so ironic to me, having lived a lot of years myself before I was able to come to peace and enter my own recovery as a recovering codependent, as I label myself. It was my worst fear to not be able to control my son, in that case, who was the person who had the chemical addiction, who is now clean and sober and living a real life. But that was my greatest fear, I think, was not being able to control him, and I was in such denial that I did not see that, though I feared it, that was exactly the case. I cannot control other people. And so the serenity part, the courage, was to actually be in the moment and see what I was doing, which I did not want to see. None of us do. That desire to control and so forth and so on, recognize it, and just reconcile and turn it over to our higher power. That I think was one of the most powerful things I have ever done in my life. And it felt, from personal experience, it felt like I was the most vulnerable. But actually it empowered me more than anything in life, perhaps up into that moment. So I would highly recommend it.
Well, and when you say that wisdom in part means what part is my job, that is instrumental in dealing with any stress, whether you're an addict, whether you're a loved one of an addict. I believe, for me, I'm both a psychotherapist and a life coach, and there's 2 principles that I live with first and foremost, and the first one is I'm 100% responsible for my behavior. I'm 100% responsible for my feelings. And that in so many ways is what you're saying when you say, what part is my job? How did I get here? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I doing? And that, of course, when you take a look, a serious self-reflection, then you're able to say, okay, now what do I need to do? Because it's not about controlling somebody else. It's about being present for my own life. Right.
Indeed. That's exactly it. And that does require courage. The victim mentality is one of covering, and it is one of not taking responsibility. Not only is it depressing because one feels like one is a perpetual victim and everything is out of control, but secondly, one can't take responsibility for one's own actions in that regard. So the courageous counterpoint to that is stopping, running, and looking, and as you say, being here. What am I looking at right now? What is inside of me? And where do I go from here?
Yeah, and, I think that takes emotional maturity. I'm always telling my clients, one of the things that I want you to continue to work on is your emotional IQ. I want you to cope better. I want you to feel better. And I want you to be more productive, not in an achieving kind of way, but be productive in the way that you look at life. And oftentimes, let's face it, that means you have to have courage and take some risks that deal with the discomfort, but take you to the next level. So I think courage is really, really important.
I always say that when we stop growing emotionally and spiritually, then we're dead. And I, for one, don't intend to be dead before my time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know you have a couple of stories, examples, if you will, of what those 4 essential ingredients, tools in the toolbox, actually mean. So you want to talk about your cat story or your own answer?
Yeah. I actually want to turn the attention to the cat story because I think it sort of says it better than any of my personal experiences. Is that all right with you? With your permission, I'll talk cats.
Go for it.
Okay. This just comes out of a blog I wrote from Light Source, and it is a personal story of a cat I once had. So, short story here. I once had a very sweet cat who, nevertheless, would often do things that made me wonder about his sanity. One rainy day, he demonstrated this to me with great flair. The rain that day was especially persistent and more than a drizzle. As I looked out the door, I spotted him sitting in his favorite spot. It happened to be right outside the protection of the overhanging roof. He was soaking wet, his little eyes blinking with each raindrop that fell into them. Had he moved 3 inches toward the house, he would have been dry. But there he sat in his favorite spot, drenched. The moral: sometimes we can get focused on doing things the way we always have, keeping things under the control of the familiar, that we fail to notice that God is providing better for us if we just let go of our mindset. I often use the Serenity Prayer to help me find my perspective. I ask myself, is this something that I can change? If so, what part? Sometimes we can actually change the circumstance, but other times we just need to get ourselves out of the rain. So that's
that
my
makes
story.
So much sense. I love that story because it deals with the acceptance of what is and what may not even be available or accessible to you if you just rely on your eyes. It's almost like,
that's right,
intuitively, if you look for spirit in any situation, you find it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So that's your cat story. Tell me about some anecdotes that have come from your own personal life.
Well, I can tell you one.
Okay.
Again, this has been a while, but I was in early recovery. So when I say recovery, I take very seriously the side of the table that the loved ones of addicts and alcoholics and sex addicts sit on. We have, as we might call it, a mirror image. So our addicts on one side of the table have one set of challenges, and the loved ones on the other side of the table, we have a very parallel set, but it is more like a mirror image. So, for example, addicts tend to have, not all addicts, but most addicts will tend to have a very self-centered and self-absorbed demeanor due to a lot of factors that are beyond their control. And the loved ones of addicts will often have no awareness of themselves or of self-care. They'll be very, very poured out for everyone else and then get resentful. So with that in mind, I have a great deal of respect for both sides of the table and have lived up close and personal with both. And when our son was in his own early recovery, and I would say he was getting close to about a year, clean and sober, he had moved out and then chose to go back to college, and we all sort of had a powwow with his counselors and and him and ourselves, and we decided that it would be a good move for him to move back to the house just long enough to graduate, and so the financial concern would not be quite as intense. So he did that, and we had a lot of adjusting to do because he had lived on his own and so forth. And so one day I had asked him to, this is me, this is my story. I had asked him if he would take our German Shepherd to the vet the next morning. And, of course, he helped out around the house and so forth, so he said sure. And so my precedent when he was in his addiction was to know that he would not necessarily be prompt with things, and this created a great deal of anxiety on my part. And so the next morning came, and the appointment was at 11, and around 10:30 I felt the old uneasiness and anxiety coming up. Maybe I should wake him, maybe I should at least tap on the door, or maybe I should do this, should do that. And I kept hearing my therapist's voice in my ear saying that is how a codependent person runs around in their own codependence, and that is not healthy. So I resisted the temptation for 10 minutes, and then I resisted for another 5, and it was 11:15. And the vet was about 12 minutes from the house. And so I became very frustrated, very angry, but I did not go upstairs. I went outside and sat down on the porch on the step. And I said, all right, they're telling me that my higher power will make things correct if I simply refuse to walk in codependence, and I release things to my higher power. So, okay, higher power, I'm going to release this to you. And I actually said those words out loud, quite angry. And I said, this is my money, my dog, and yet I do not want to be codependent. So I am going to sit here, and I'm releasing this to you. And if our son doesn't come down, then so be it. I'll lose some money, but I'm going to gain some ground in my own recovery. And I sat, and 3 minutes went by, and it seemed like 3 hours. And here comes the son, here comes the dog. They pop in the car, and they head for the appointment right on time. So at that point, I felt
frustration and that need to control and that fear that it wasn't going to happen the way it should have. And I truly believe when you do talk to your higher power, you're more likely to get the answer that you need, not necessarily the outcome that you want. I mean, your outcome turned out beautifully, but you'll at least get the answer, and maybe that is, let this go. You can't control it. You certainly didn't cause it, and you can't cure it, so let it go.
That's right. At that point, I was prepared for it to work out whatever way it was going to work out. The line that I had drawn in the sand was for myself. I will not live like this. I will not live trying to control a full-grown man. And indeed, at that point, I got a turnaround in my own recovery, and I haven't been the same since. The momentum picked up, and I definitely dropped a lot of the old behaviors and attitudes. And, of course, in that particular instance, it did come out in the way I would have wanted it to. It's not always the case, but again, a series of those, one foot in front of the other, small victories, and now we look back, and he's 5 years clean and sober, and I am on with my new life for several years now. So it's one step at a time really does add up.
Yeah, now let me just pick your brain for a minute. You've got so much expertise with drug and alcohol abuse, and the substance abuses. How do you see that the same or different from sexual addiction?
Well, I see it the same and different. It is it's both actually. It is definitely in under the umbrella of disease process, 4 stages and so forth. In that clinically, it is exactly what a chemical addiction is, and so process addiction, like sex addiction, does have nuances. It's just like every form of cancer is not exactly the same, and has its own timeline and prognosis and way of people experiencing it. So addiction is that way. So it is definitely a disease, just like alcoholism or chemical addiction, but it has very unique properties to it. And I practiced in clinical addictions for years before I figured out that there was another addiction present in some of those chemical addicts that I did not see with an untrained eye. So I had to get a whole year, a year's worth of work to certify in sexual addictions therapy in order to be able to spot it and to offer the proper kind of help. Does that make sense?
100%. And I'm very curious, when you work with sexual addiction, is your treatment program different than when you work with drug or alcohol addiction?
I would say that, there's a resounding yes to your question. Resounding yes. I have a whole protocol that is, let's just say it is more specific because of the kind of neural pathways that this involves and the way that they're activated. But there are many similarities, such as the stages of recovery are very similar for a chemical addict and a sex addict. The timeline for recovery is very similar. Our brains repair sufficiently for us to begin new reasoning within about a year, at least to begin. They continue repairing after that, but that part is fairly similar. The damage to the brain, for example, is very similar between sex addiction and chemical addiction. So, and also the need for, in my practice, I require clients who want the best chance of staying in remission and staying in recovery. I require them to do 12-step work, to become a part of a 12-step group with all of the protocol that goes with that, sponsorship and so forth and so on. So,
and can I interrupt you for a minute?
Go ahead, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I'm curious. I was just talking about this at the beginning of the show. For clients that are agnostic or atheist, you said I require them to do 12-step work. So how do you handle that very specific population?
Well, we have the requirement is for those who wish to have the best chance of keeping the disease in remission. And that I just based on the statistics. There are better statistics so far for those who are in 12-step programs in addition to therapy, and better statistics yet between the 12-step the programs that do not have a higher power involved, and those that do. So the ones that do carry a better track record of sustained recovery. So I let my clients know that, at the very outset. And it's not that I won't see anyone who is not willing to look at 12-step work, but I'm very honest that I cannot offer them as good a statistic. Cannot put them as far up in the statistics as I would be able to if they would embrace also the 12-step work on the side and in addition to their therapy.
Okay, so what you kind of do is spell out that their success would be greater, the success rate, if they were to figure out a way to work a 12-step program.
Right.
And it does sound like you do work with the client if they don't. But
yeah, I can work with clients who do not. However, I'm very careful not to misrepresent their chances because I believe that they're very, very tied, to the openness to be eventually involved in a 12-step. And part of that, Carol, I think is, as it says in the big book, which is the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is known by a lot of people now, a person who wishes to, this disease does not have a cure. It is like cancer. There is great hope for putting it in remission and keeping it there. But if we're going to do that, we have to be willing to go to any length, is the quote from the Big Book. And I do believe that. There's so much a therapist can do. There's a lot that a therapist can do. I highly recommend therapy for any addict. Would the 12 steps alone be enough? Good question. For some people, yes, and some people, no. But when we have someone that we are working with as therapists who will say, I will do only a certain amount of what you're telling me, that alone takes the statistical probability down a bit that they'll be able to get it and keep it in remission. So I'm just open with people about that. And most people who are serious about their recovery are at a place where they're pretty much willing to try about anything. And those people who say, I'm not a 12-stepper, I'm not a bandwagon kind of guy or girl, I say, okay, so try it for 6 meetings and see where you are. And if, again, it's not a hard and fast requirement, but it is certainly a very reasonable recommendation based on the stats.
Absolutely. And, obviously, Light Source Counseling does work with addictions and does have an endorsement of 12-step programs. I mean, you are a pastoral counselor as well as a certified sexual addictions therapist, and that is the frame of reference that you work from, first and foremost.
That's right. Yeah. And the 12-step groups, it's interesting that they are not, most people who say, I'm not, you're not going to get me into a 12-step meeting, you have never been. And so, what's the harm in going, so forth and so on. The 12-step groups these days are very open as far as, they like to just say, there's just a power greater than you, and that's what we believe here. So that can be whatever you see that as you understand it. So it isn't, for example, closed to any certain faith or anything like that. It's not. I've heard it described in many ways, and what works for one will not necessarily work for another. But they all seem to be at the same meeting and have the same confirmation that they're on the right track. So, yeah, I would say that Christian counseling is something that I can do, and sometimes I do, but it is not the case with all my clients, and I certainly don't bring it in if they're not, if that's not where they live.
And so tell us, how do you get to your website and how can people get a hold of you?
Well, I can be found at lightsourcecounseling.com, so www.lightsourcecounseling.com. And on there, there's some resources and a blog and links to some self-tests and things like that. People wondering perhaps they might fit into the population of sex addicts or codependents and so forth and so on. They can kind of get on there. They can also link up to other websites such as the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Therapists, professionals that you and I both certified through, and to some other sites and other resources. I practice currently out of an office in Muncie, Indiana, and can be reached at about any time. I usually try and return any emails or phone calls within 24 hours, so it can all be found right on the website. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one more time for people that are now just getting their pens and papers together, they can reach you at www.lightsource, L-I-G-H-T, source, S-O-U-R-C-E, counseling, all one word, .com, and then my email is lightsourcecounseling, same thing, all one word, at gmail.com. Well, very good. As we begin to end the show, you say that you can summarize the tools of stress management with the Serenity Prayer. So explain that to us as we end for tonight.
Serenity Prayer goes back quite a bit in our history. A pastor has written that, and it's a rather long one, very, very well done. What we know as the Serenity Prayer now is usually said at 12-step meetings, and it's a very brief version, and begins with, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
And
so I think that would be, that's my summary, I think. That would be a good summary of the philosophy behind Light Source.
Well, that totally makes sense because, again, that in so many ways encapsulates those 4 very important essentials to navigating stress: awareness, wisdom, courage, and acceptance. And so, Lisa, I cannot emphasize enough how helpful you've been tonight in kind of sharing how to navigate stress and anxiety, which most everybody suffers from in some capacity, but certainly our sex addicts really have what feels like an unmanageable amount of stress and anxiety while they're in active abuse, and then when they begin to recover, it's such a transition for them. Thank you so much, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much, Carol, for having me on. It's an honor, and glad to be of service.
Oh, thank you so much. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
So, that was Lisa Ferguson. Again, her website is lightsourcecounseling@gmail.com. That's her email address, and Light Source Counseling is the name of her counseling center. Now, next week, we are going to be talking with a woman who has written meditations to get you through sexual addiction and into sexual recovery. Alex Katakakis is going to be with us next week. So I'll look forward to talking with her and sharing information with you. And as I say at the end of every show, so only be one of you at all times. So fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. If you need me, you can email me at carolthecoach@AOL.com. Check me out at Sex Help with Carol the Coach. And make sure to like my Facebook page on Strength, Hope, and Recovery. We'll see you next week.